I just wanted to explain for the people who are on the quilting board, we're doing a group project with this floral master fabric that a few of us had, and we're working from the series of books by Maxine Rosenthal, the One Block Wonder series, which some people have got up to the stage where they're ready to join the rows together and they weren't completely clear on how to do it. So I just wanted to share my way of pinning points in general. And also in pressing open seams. So I'm going to show you how I pin, how I then sew up to the pins and remove the pins, and then how I press the seam open. Okay, so first I'm going to show you the pinning. We've got our piece that we're working on, and we need some of our flat flower-headed pins. Say that fast 5 times. The same ones that we used when we were stacking and layering the fabrics. As per the instructions in the book. That one's not incredibly straight either. You see the line there across the seam allowance, which was formed by the seam of when you joined the 2 triangles together. Where that horizontal line meets the seam allowance, you put your pin, because that shows you where the point is of this triangle that has its wrong side facing you. So you put your pin straight vertical through that point. And then the part underneath that you're going to sew it to, with your seam allowance open, how you've pressed them, into the point of that triangle. Straight, vertical, like when you were pinning the repeats together. And then line them up, push them together, hold them at the back between your forefinger and your middle finger, with the pin standing vertical. Then you take a second pin and hold those 2 parts that are loose there together, and then take this pin, go into the seam allowance of the right hand block as you're looking at it, and then on the back you can see you're also in the seam allowance of the block that it's going to join to, and then you come out again, all the time keeping this pin vertical because that means your points are lined up, on diagonal into the opposite seam allowances, like that, just so the point comes through and then stop. You see I'm using these long flower pins. You need to leave as much of that pointing out as possible, because when you sew you want to stop with your needle here and be able to get that pin out. And then you can take the vertical pin away. I'll just show you one more, just to be sure that I've explained it well. You look for that horizontal line across the seam allowance where it meets where you join those 2 patches together, and you go straight in that point. And then the second piece, you look for the point of the triangle, you go straight in. Make sure that all your seam allowances are staying nicely open. You'll see as well that these 2 little dog ears are lining up as well, which is why you leave those on. And then you take your second pin, get these 2 fingers and hold that. And then you go in, and here you've got the seam allowance coming the opposite way. So there you're going to go through this seam allowance and this with the point of your pin. As shallow as possible. You'll prick your finger, it's like changing a baby's diaper. And then at the back you see you're coming out through that seam allowance. And then back in just with the point of the pin. As soon as you see the point, about a 1/16 of an inch, you stop and take that one out. Okay, so now we're going to sew this seam together. Okay, you see I didn't pin here, the first seam, because there's no cross. So all I do is I just line up those 2 dog ears there with the 2 underneath, and then you know that that's lined up, with the raw edges aligned as well. More or less, you can see there's always a little bit of give, but the bias takes care of that. So put that under the needle and put my needle down, and then I start to sew. I'll go slowly so you can see. Right, now here, because I've got my 1/4 inch guide, it always does that, so I have to lift it. Now I just sew along until the needle goes in to that seam allowance, and now that's all held in place, those points are held, the pin's now redundant so I can take it out. I'll go along to the next one. Now here you have to be very careful because this is on the bias. That's why I've got this walking foot on, which is not completely necessary, but I find it does help. You see how stretchy that is? So don't pull it, let the feed dogs pull it through gently. And along you go. Because of my guide, it pushes my dog ears up. Your arrangement might not do this. I just lift it. And along again until the needle hits the seam allowance, the seam line, and then you can remove the pin. Take the pin out, and you just do that all the way along. You'll also notice that when you've got your 1/4 inch right, as you come along to that horizontal line we were looking at earlier when we were pinning, that should be your 1/4 inch line. So your joining seam here should follow along that line there. And now we're going to go and press the seam open. Okay. I know some people struggle with pressing seams open because we're so used to pressing them to one side, but with these One Block Wonder quilts, we're working from Maxine Rosenthal's book. I should have said that earlier. I think it is completely necessary to press the seams open. Here's how I do it. Just get your iron hot, no steam. Don't ever do this because of all that bias. You press down against the seam line so that you're making this seam we've just sewn stand upright. And I go all the way along like that. You can very gently hold it and move it out here so that you're getting right in against that stitching line. But don't pull it too hard because of the bias. And I go all the way along that one side. Sorry, I'll go corded, otherwise it'll keep cooling down. And then the same the other side. Try and keep out of the way of the camera. And the goal here is to get that seam to stand straight upright like that. Don't iron your finger. You can see that I speak from experience. Okay, and when you've got that standing upright like that, start halfway along the first block and just push at that seam with your fingers to get it open. And then once you've got it open, you can go with the point of your iron and just gently wiggle to open it up. And when you've got it open along the length of your iron, you can press it down. And it's a bit fiddly, but I'm a bit nervous because I'm on camera. It's my excuse anyway. And you see you can just go along with the iron and press. The wiggling part is with the iron off the fabric, it's just to open the seam up. And press along and press. And once I've done that length that's on my board at the moment, I go back, I get my trusty can of starch, a little spritz along the seam. I always wait till I hear it stop going tss, then I know it's soaked in. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and that's it, more or less. And I always press my seams when I'm joining as I go. I find that easier than suddenly having a load to do at once. And then if you want, it's not completely necessary at this stage, you can turn over to the right side and just give it again a press. And that's it.